Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I stood alone in the elegant banquet hall I had reserved and paid for white linens gleaming under crystal chandeliers. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Sarah. "We're in Paris. Nobody cares about your graduation dinner." Another message from cousin Derek appeared. "Oh, and your $34,000 savings covered our tickets. Thanks." The silence echoed around me as I stared at the empty tables set for 20 guests. My law school graduation celebration, months of planning, thousands spent. I whispered one word. Good. Tonight, everything changes. The banquet hall felt cavernous as I sat at the head table, my phone screen illuminating my face in the dim lighting. 20 place settings surrounded me, each one representing a family member who should have been celebrating this milestone with me. Instead, I was scrolling through Instagram stories that made my stomach churn with each swipe. There was Sarah, my 23-year-old sister, raising a champagne flute at what looked like a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Eiffel Tower. The caption read, "Living our best life in the City of Light." The timestamp showed it was posted just 2 hours ago, right when our dinner was supposed to begin. I kept scrolling. Derek, my 25-year-old cousin, had posted a video of himself shopping on the Champs-Élysées, showing off shopping bags from Louis Vuitton and Hermès. "When you finally get that family money," he had written with laughing emojis. My hands started trembling as I realized the scope of their deception. This wasn't some spontaneous trip. They had been planning this for weeks, maybe months, while actively helping me organize this graduation celebration. Sarah had helped me choose the menu. Derek had suggested the wine selection. They had both insisted on inviting extended family members, claiming they wanted to make it really special for my achievement. The restaurant staff began clearing the untouched appetizers from the empty tables. I had spent $4,000 on this dinner, choosing expensive options because I wanted to share my success with the people I loved most. The irony burned in my chest. My girlfriend Jessica walked through the entrance, her face lighting up before immediately falling as she took in the scene. She was wearing the navy blue dress I had bought her specifically for tonight, her blonde hair styled in soft curls. "Milton, where is everyone?" she asked, her voice echoing in the empty space. I couldn't speak. Instead, I handed her my phone, showing her the Instagram posts. Her expression changed from confusion to horror as she scrolled through the evidence of betrayal. "They're in Paris," I finally managed. "They used my money to go to Paris instead of coming to my graduation dinner." Jessica's green eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. "Your money? What do you mean your money?" I opened my banking app. Something I should have checked earlier, but had been too focused on last-minute dinner preparations. The numbers on the screen hit me like physical blows. Withdrawal after withdrawal, each one labeled Family Emergency Fund, or Sarah Education Support, or Derek Business Investment. $34,000. Gone. I gave them access to my savings account for emergencies. I explained, my voice hollow. Sarah said she needed help with unexpected college expenses. Derek claimed his startup was about to take off, but needed bridge funding. I trusted them completely. Jessica sat down heavily in the chair next to mine. "Milton, how long has this been going on?" I started adding up the amounts in my head, going back through months of statements. 3 years, I whispered. 3 years of family emergencies and business opportunities and education costs. I've been supporting both of them since I started law school. The full picture began forming in my mind. Every time I had worked late into the night studying for the bar exam, Sarah would text about needing money for textbooks or rent. Every time I had sacrificed social events to focus on my career, Derek would call with another business crisis that required immediate funding. I had been so proud to help my family, so determined to be the responsible one who lifted everyone up. "There's more," Jessica said quietly, her face pale as she continued scrolling through their posts. "Look at this." She showed me a group photo from what appeared to be a first-class airline cabin. Sarah, Derek, and 3 other family members I recognized, all raising glasses in a toast. The caption from Derek's account read, "Family vacation funded by inheritance money. Thanks, Grandma. Inheritance money." My grandmother had passed away 5 years ago, but there had never been any inheritance money. At least none that I had received. My parents had handled all the estate affairs, telling me that everything had gone to settle debts and final expenses. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. Then, immediately, another call from Derek. I stared at the phones, letting them ring until they went to voicemail. "Don't answer," Jessica said firmly. "Not until we figure out exactly what they've taken from you." She was right. But as I sat in that empty banquet hall, surrounded by the remnants of a celebration that no one but Jessica had bothered to attend, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money. This was about systematic manipulation and exploitation that had been going on for years. I thought back to Christmas dinner when Jessica had pulled me aside and mentioned overhearing Sarah and Derek talking in the kitchen. They had been laughing about something, and she had caught the words, "pathetic graduation party," and "desperate for family approval." At the time, I had dismissed it, assuming she had misheard or taken something out of context. Now I understood. They had been mocking me, even then planning their escape while pretending to support my achievements. My phone buzzed again this time with a text message from Derek. "Bro, the cards aren't working. Can you check with the bank? We're trying to extend our hotel stay." The audacity was breathtaking. They had stolen my money, abandoned my graduation celebration, lied to our entire family, and now they wanted me to fix their payment problems from Paris. I looked at Jessica, who was watching me with a mixture of concern and determination. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I stood up slowly, straightening my tie and buttoning my suit jacket. The empty banquet hall suddenly didn't feel tragic anymore. It felt like a battlefield, and I was finally ready to fight back. "I'm going to show them what happens when you steal from a lawyer." I said, my voice steady for the first time all evening. "But first, we need to go home and figure out exactly how much they've taken. Because something tells me $34,000 is just the beginning." My apartment felt different when we returned, as if the betrayal had somehow changed the very air inside. Jessica made coffee while I spread bank statements across my dining room table, creating a timeline of financial abuse that stretched back further than I had initially realized. The pattern was methodical and sophisticated. Sarah's requests always came during my most stressful academic periods when I was too overwhelmed to scrutinize the details. Emergency tuition payments, unexpected medical bills, car repairs that couldn't wait. Derek's appeals were more elaborate, involving business opportunities that required immediate investment to avoid missing crucial deadlines. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a series of transactions from 18 months ago. Sarah claimed she needed $8,000 for a specialized summer program that would guarantee her entry into graduate school. But according to her social media, she spent that summer backpacking through Europe with her sorority sisters. Jessica reviewed the bank statements with the analytical mind that had made her successful in her marketing career. "These withdrawals follow a pattern," she observed. "They always happen in clusters just before major family gatherings or holidays, like they were coordinating their requests to maximize the amounts they could extract." I pulled up my email account and started searching for correspondence with my family members. What I found made my blood pressure spike. Dozens of messages between Sarah and Derek copied to me. but clearly not intended for my careful review, discussing their allowances and monthly stipends, as if they were entitled to my financial support. One email thread from 6 months ago caught my attention. Derek had written to Sarah, "Milton owes us for all the emotional support we've given him through law school. He makes too much money from that legal clinic job anyway. Rich lawyers don't understand what it's like to struggle. Legal clinic job." I had worked 25 hours per week at a legal aid clinic while maintaining a full course load, earning barely enough to cover my own expenses while supporting their lifestyle. The characterization of me as a wealthy lawyer exploiting my struggling family was so distorted, it would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. Jessica discovered something even worse. "Milton, did you know that Derek has been using your address for business credit applications?" She showed me her laptop screen where she had found Derek's name associated with 3 different business credit cards, all listing my apartment as the business address. My stomach dropped as I realized the implications. He's been building business credit using my address and, potentially, my credit history. I said, reaching for my laptop to check my credit report. If any of those businesses fail or default on payments, it could affect my financial standing. The credit report revealed the full scope of the identity theft. Derek had opened 4 business credit accounts using variations of my name and address, accumulating $53,000 in debt across various consulting and import-export ventures. None of these businesses appeared to have any legitimate operations. "We need to call the police," Jessica said. "This is identity theft and fraud." But I wasn't ready for that step yet. I had something else to investigate first. I called my parents, hoping they could provide some context for this situation. "Milton." My mother Linda's voice sounded unusually cheerful when she answered. "How was your graduation dinner?" "We're so sorry we couldn't be there, but the kids surprised us with this amazing family trip to celebrate your achievement." "Mom, where exactly are you?" "We're in Paris." Can you believe it? Sarah and Derek organized this whole vacation to honor your law school graduation. They said you had encouraged them to take us somewhere special while you focused on starting your career. It was so thoughtful of you to arrange everything. My father, Robert, took the phone. "Son, I have to say, your generosity continues to amaze us. This trip must have cost a fortune. But Derek explained that you wanted us to experience Paris while we're still young enough to enjoy it. The hotel is incredible, and the restaurant they took us to last night was like something from a movie." I closed my eyes, feeling the full weight of the manipulation. My parents genuinely believed I had funded their trip and encouraged them to skip my graduation dinner in favor of a European vacation. Sarah and Derek had crafted a narrative that painted me as the generous family patriarch who preferred to celebrate my achievements by giving my loved ones luxury experiences. "Dad, I didn't arrange any trip to Paris," I said carefully. In fact, Sarah and Derek took the money from my savings account without my knowledge or permission. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When my father finally spoke, his voice had changed completely. "What are you saying, Milton?" "I'm saying that the money they used to pay for your flights and hotels was stolen from my account. I've been sitting in an empty banquet hall for the past 3 hours, waiting for family members who are currently dining in Paris on my dime." I heard my mother crying in the background, and my father's heavy breathing as he processed the information. "But Derek showed us the bank confirmations," my father said weakly. "He said you had set up a special travel fund as a graduation gift to the family. He had official-looking documents." "Forged," I said. "Dad, they've been systematically draining my accounts for 3 years. Tonight was just the culmination of a long-term financial abuse scheme." Jessica was typing furiously on her laptop, pulling up additional information about Derek's business ventures. She turned the screen toward me showing a series of Delaware corporate filings for companies that all shared variations of Derek's name and my address. "Your cousin has been quite busy," she said grimly. 6 different corporations, all claiming to be consulting firms or import businesses. And look at this, 2 of them list you as a business partner. The room started spinning as I realized I had been unknowingly involved in Derek's business ventures through forged documents and stolen identity information. If any of these companies had legal problems or tax issues, my name was officially associated with them. "I have to go," I told my parents. "We'll talk more when you get back from Paris. But Dad, you need to know that your return flights might not be paid for. You should check with Derek about backup payment methods." After I hung up Jessica, and I spent another 2 hours documenting every fraudulent transaction, every identity theft incident, and every forged document we could find. The total amount of stolen money approached $87,000 when we included the business credit cards and the Paris vacation expenses. But the financial theft was only part of the story. They had also stolen my family relationships, my graduation celebration, and my trust in people I had loved unconditionally. They had turned my generosity into a weapon against me, using my success to fund their irresponsible lifestyle while simultaneously mocking my achievements. As we organized the evidence into neat folders on my dining room table, my phone buzzed with another message from Derek. "Dude, seriously, the cards are all getting declined. Can you call the bank? Mom and Dad are starting to ask questions, and we don't want them to worry during their vacation." I stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to Jessica. She shook her head in disbelief. "They're still trying to manipulate you," she said. "Even now, after stealing everything, they want you to fix their problems." I set the phone down without responding and looked at the evidence spread across my table. Bank statements, credit reports, forged documents, and social media posts that documented 3 years of systematic theft and emotional manipulation. "Tomorrow," I said, "we start fighting back." I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, my mind crystal clear for the first time in months. While Jessica slept, I made coffee and began executing the plan I had formulated during the sleepless hours of the night. The first call went to my primary bank, where I reported unauthorized access to my accounts and requested immediate fraud protection measures. The customer service representative, a professional woman named Catherine, took detailed notes as I explained the situation. "Mr. Milton, I'm showing multiple authorized users on your savings and checking accounts," she said. "To remove them, I'll need to verify some additional security information." "Remove them all," I said firmly. "Change all access codes, issue new account numbers, and flag any future attempts to access these accounts as potential fraud. Sir, this will immediately terminate any automatic payments or transfers associated with these accounts. Are you sure you want to proceed?" "Absolutely certain." Next, I called the credit card companies associated with Derek's fraudulent business accounts. Each conversation followed a similar pattern: report identity theft dispute. All charges request investigation of the account openings, and freeze any additional credit inquiries under my name or address. The third call was the most satisfying. I contacted Sarah's University Financial Aid Office and spoke with a counselor named Ms. Rodriguez. "I need to report fraudulent information on my sister's financial aid applications," I said. "She's been listing false income sources and family financial support that doesn't actually exist." Ms. Rodriguez explained that knowingly providing false information on federal financial aid applications was a serious offense that could result in immediate suspension of aid and potential criminal charges. "I'll need documentation of the fraudulent claims," she said. "Can you provide bank statements showing that the reported family contributions were never actually made?" "I can provide bank statements showing that the reported family contributions were actually money stolen from my personal accounts without authorization," I replied. By 8 o'clock in the morning, I had systematically dismantled the financial infrastructure that Sarah and Derek had been using to fund their lifestyle. Every credit card was canceled, every bank account was secured, and every fraudulent application was under investigation. My phone started ringing at 8:15. Sarah's name appeared first, followed immediately by Derek's. I let both calls go to voicemail, then listened to the messages. Sarah's voice was panicked. "Milton, what did you do? My card got declined at breakfast, and the hotel is saying there's a problem with our payment method. Call me back right now." Derek's message was more aggressive. "Bro, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you're embarrassing us in front of Mom and Dad. Fix this immediately, or I'm calling Uncle Robert to tell him how you're sabotaging the family vacation." Jessica emerged from the bedroom, already dressed for work, and found me calmly eating breakfast, while my phone continued buzzing with ignored calls. "How do you feel?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "Powerful," I said simply. "For the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm in control of my own life." At 9 o'clock, my phone rang with a call from my father. This time, I answered. "Milton, there seems to be some kind of banking error," he said, his voice strained. "Derek and Sarah are saying all their cards have been canceled, and the hotel is asking for alternative payment methods for our rooms." "It's not a banking error, Dad. I've canceled their access to my accounts and reported the identity theft to the credit agencies." "But son, we're stranded here. Our return flights aren't until Tuesday, and we don't have enough money to cover the hotel costs if their cards aren't working." This was the moment I had been preparing for all morning. "Dad, I'm happy to help you and Mom get home safely. I can book your return flights and cover your hotel for tonight. But Sarah and Derek are on their own. You can't be serious. They're family. Family doesn't steal $87,000 from each other, Dad. Family doesn't forge business documents using stolen identities. And family definitely doesn't abandon graduation celebrations to go on vacation with stolen money." The silence stretched between us as my father processed the scope of what I was saying. $87,000, he whispered. "That's just what I've discovered so far. Derek has also opened business credit accounts using my identity, leaving me potentially liable for another $53,000 in business debt." I heard my father talking to my mother in the background, explaining the situation. When he returned to the phone, his voice had changed. "What do you need from us?" he asked. "I need you to stop enabling their behavior," I said. "I need you to understand that helping them avoid consequences for theft and fraud isn't protecting them. It's encouraging them to hurt more people. And if we do that, you'll help us get home. I'll book your flights today and transfer money to your account for the hotel. But when you get back to the United States, we're going to have a serious conversation about how this family handles money and accountability." After I hung up with my father, I began the process of financially separating my life from my manipulative family members. I changed my address with all financial institutions, opened new accounts at a different bank, and hired a forensic accountant to trace every fraudulent transaction back to its source. But the most important discovery came when I was researching property records to ensure Derek hadn't used my identity for any real estate transactions. As I searched through county databases, I found something unexpected. My name appeared as the primary mortgage holder on the family home where Derek and Sarah had been living, rent-free for the past 2 years. I called the mortgage company and spoke with a supervisor named Mr. Williams. "I'm calling to verify my mortgage payment status and review the terms of my loan. Mr. Milton, I show that you have an excellent payment history on your property on Maple Street. The monthly payments have been automatically deducted from your account for the past 7 years. 7 years. I had been unknowingly paying the mortgage on the family home since I was 21 years old, straight out of college. My family had been living in a house that I was legally and financially responsible for, while charging me additional money for their rent and living expenses." "Sir, are you there?" Mr. Williams asked. "I'm here. Can you tell me who has been living in that property? According to our records, the property is owner-occupied by you. If that's not accurate, you'll need to contact us immediately, because that could affect your loan terms. I hung up the phone and stared at the mortgage documents I had pulled up on my computer. Not only had I been supporting Sarah and Derek financially for 3 years, but I had been unknowingly providing them with free housing for 7 years. The scope of the deception was so massive that it took my breath away. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had been systematically exploiting my identity and credit to build their entire lifestyle. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Whatever you're doing, knock it off. You're ruining Mom and Dad's vacation, and Sarah is crying. This isn't like you." I typed back a single word. Good. For the first time since I had stood alone in that banquet hall, I smiled. Sarah and Derek returned from their abbreviated Paris vacation 3 days later, and the battle lines were immediately drawn. They showed up at my apartment building at 7 o'clock in the morning, buzzing my intercom repeatedly until I finally answered. "Open the door, Milton." Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker. "We need to talk." "We can talk through the intercom," I replied calmly. "Don't be ridiculous. Let us up." "No." I heard Derek's voice in the background. Then Sarah again. "Milton, you're being completely unreasonable. We came home early to fix this misunderstanding, and the least you can do is let us explain." "Explain what?" "How you stole nearly $90,000 from me. How you used my identity to open fraudulent business accounts. How you abandoned my graduation dinner to go on vacation with my money. It wasn't stealing." Derek's voice came through loud and clear. "You gave us access to those accounts. We've been family partners in everything for years." The word partners hit me like a physical blow. Even now, faced with irrefutable evidence of their theft, they were trying to reframe the situation as a business disagreement rather than criminal fraud. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave the building," I said, and I meant it. They left, but the war had just begun. Within hours, my phone started ringing with calls from extended family members. Aunt Patricia, Uncle James, Cousin Lisa, and Grandmother Margaret on my father's side. Each conversation followed the same script. Sarah and Derek had contacted them with a heartbreaking story about how I had suffered a mental breakdown from the stress of law school and was now making false accusations against family members who had only tried to help me. Aunt Patricia's call was the most difficult. She had helped raise me after my parents divorced when I was 12, and I had always respected her judgment. "Milton's sweetheart Derek explained that you've been under tremendous pressure lately," she said gently. "Law school can be overwhelming, and sometimes, when we're stressed, we can misinterpret innocent family financial arrangements. Aunt Patricia, they stole nearly $100,000 from me over 3 years. They used my identity to open business credit accounts. This isn't a misinterpretation, it's systematic fraud. But honey, Derek showed me the documents proving that you had set up joint business ventures with him. He has bank statements showing regular transfers that you authorized. Forged documents," I said firmly. "And those transfers were unauthorized withdrawals from accounts they had emergency access to. Derek also mentioned that you've been exhibiting some concerning behaviors lately. Paranoia accusations against family members, social isolation. Have you considered talking to someone professional about the stress you're under?" I realized then that Sarah and Derek had prepared for this confrontation. They had anticipated that I would eventually discover their theft, and they had crafted a narrative that painted me as mentally unstable and unreliable. They were systematically turning my extended family against me by portraying themselves as concerned relatives trying to help a troubled young man. Aunt Patricia. "I love you, but I need you to think about something. If I were having a mental breakdown and making false accusations, why would I also cancel my own credit cards and freeze my own bank accounts? What mentally unstable person protects their own financial assets? The silence told me she hadn't considered that angle. I'm going to send you documentation of everything they've stolen. I continued. Bank statements, credit reports, forged business documents, and social media posts showing them bragging about their theft. Look at the evidence before you decide who's telling the truth. After I hung up, Jessica arrived at my apartment with disturbing news from her family gathering the night before. My cousin works at the university's financial aid office, she said. She couldn't give me specifics because of privacy laws, but she did say that there's been a lot of unusual activity around Sarah's student accounts recently, and that multiple agencies are now investigating financial aid fraud claims. Good, I said. She's about to learn that there are consequences for lying on federal documents, but Jessica looked worried. Milton, there's something else. My cousin mentioned that Sarah and Derek have hired a lawyer. They're claiming that you've been financially controlling them for years, and they're considering filing harassment charges against you for freezing their accounts. The audacity was breathtaking, but not entirely surprising. They were now trying to use the legal system to legitimize their theft by claiming that I had been financially abusing them, and they were simply trying to escape my control. Let them file charges, I said. I have 3 years of documented evidence showing voluntary financial support that they systematically abused. Any lawyer worth their fee will tell them they don't have a case. That afternoon, I discovered they had attempted something even more bold. I received a call from my apartment building's management office. Mr. Milton, we had a couple here earlier claiming to be your family members, the property manager said. They said you had given them a spare key and permission to access your apartment while you were dealing with some personal issues. They seemed to have a key, but it didn't work in your lock. Good thing I changed the locks, I said. If they come back, please call the police immediately. They're not authorized to access my property under any circumstances. They mentioned something about collecting belongings that you were holding for them. They don't have any belongings in my apartment. They're trying to gain unauthorized access to my home. I realized they were probably hoping to find and destroy some of the financial documents I had been collecting as evidence of their fraud. The fact that they still had old keys to my apartment suggested they had been planning this confrontation for longer than I had initially suspected. That evening, my phone rang with a call from my parents who had returned from Paris that morning. Milton, we need to talk, my father said without preamble. Derek and Sarah came to see us this afternoon, and they're saying some very concerning things about your recent behavior. What kind of things? They're saying you've become obsessed with money, that you're making false accusations against family members, and that you've threatened to have them arrested for trying to help you manage your finances. I took a deep breath, recognizing the manipulation tactic. They were trying to isolate me from my parents by convincing them that I was the problem. Dad, did Derek and Sarah explain how they were able to afford a $10,000 vacation to Paris on the same day as my graduation dinner? They said you had encouraged them to take a family trip to celebrate your achievement, and that you had provided the funding as a graduation gift to everyone. Dad, I want you to think carefully about what you just said. Why would I give them money for a vacation on the exact same day as my graduation dinner? Why would I pay for them to be in Paris instead of celebrating with me in person? Another long silence. They said you preferred a quiet, private celebration, and that you thought the family would enjoy Paris more than a formal dinner. And you believed that, Milton, you've always been generous with money, and you've always put family first. It seemed consistent with your character. What seems consistent with my character spending $4,000 on a graduation dinner that nobody attends because I secretly paid for them to be on another continent? Does that really sound logical to you? I heard my mother crying in the background, and my father's voice became strained. What do you want from us, Milton? I want you to stop enabling theft and fraud. I want you to acknowledge that stealing someone's money is wrong, regardless of family relationships. And I want you to understand that I'm going to pursue legal action against anyone who has defrauded me, including family members. But they're saying you've cut them off from everything. Derek can't make his rent payment, and Sarah can't afford groceries. You're leaving them homeless and hungry. Dad Derek has been living rent-free in a house that I've been unknowingly paying the mortgage on for 7 years. Sarah has been receiving fraudulent financial aid while I paid her actual college expenses. Neither of them has been homeless or hungry. They've been living beyond their means on stolen money. What are you talking about? What house? I explained about the mortgage discovery, and the silence on the other end of the line told me this was news to my parents as well. You're saying Derek has been living in your house? My father finally asked. I'm saying Derek has been living in a house that I legally own and financially maintain while charging me additional rent money for his living expenses. He's been double billing me for housing while living there for free. When my father finally spoke again, his voice was different. Milton, we need to see all the evidence you've collected. Everything. We need to understand exactly what's been happening here. Are you ready to hear the truth, even if it means acknowledging that Derek and Sarah have been lying to you for years? We're ready, my father said quietly. I smiled for the second time that week. The meeting with my parents took place at their kitchen table on a Saturday morning, with financial documents spread across the surface, like evidence in a criminal investigation. My father, Robert, a retired electrician with calloused hands and an honest face, stared at the bank statements with growing horror. My mother, Linda, a former high school teacher who had always prided herself on seeing through deception, kept shaking her head as she reviewed the credit reports. $140,000, my father said quietly, adding up the totals for the third time. They've stolen $140,000. The number had grown as we uncovered additional fraudulent accounts and hidden transactions. Derek had been more creative than I had initially realized, using my identity and credit history to secure business loans, equipment financing, and even a small commercial property lease. It gets worse, I said, pulling out the property records I had researched. I need to show you something that I discovered yesterday. I handed them the mortgage documents for the family home on Maple Street, the house where Derek and Sarah currently lived. I don't understand, my mother said, scanning the papers. What does your mortgage have to do with Derek and Sarah? Mom, this is the mortgage for Derek and Sarah's house. According to these documents, I'm the primary borrower and legal owner of the property. I've been paying the mortgage for 7 years without knowing it. My father's face went white. That's impossible. Derek inherited that house from your grandmother. No, Dad. Derek has been living in a house that I own while telling everyone he inherited it and charging me additional rent money for his living expenses. The silence stretched for nearly a minute as my parents processed this information. But the mortgage payments, my mother said weakly. How could you be making mortgage payments without knowing it? I pulled up my automatic payment history on my laptop. Look at this. Every month for 7 years, $640 has been automatically withdrawn from my checking account for something labeled Property Management Services. I assumed it was related to the investment portfolio that grandmother's attorney set up for me. What investment portfolio? My father asked sharply. The trust fund from grandmother's will. The attorney said she left me control of a real estate portfolio when I turned 25, but that you and Mom had been managing it until then. My parents looked at each other with expressions I had never seen before, a mixture of confusion, fear, and dawning realization. Milton. My mother said carefully, "We never managed any trust fund for you. We never received any information about a real estate portfolio. That's impossible. Mr. Henderson at the law firm explained everything to me last month when I went to update my address after the identity theft. He said grandmother left me control of properties worth over $2 million, and that you had been collecting the rental income as managers until I was old enough to take over. My father stood up abruptly and started pacing the small kitchen. "We need to call this attorney right now." 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the law office of Henderson Williams and Associates, meeting with Mr. Henderson himself. He was a distinguished man in his 60s who had handled my grandmother's estate and looked increasingly uncomfortable as he reviewed the files. "Mr. Milton, I'm afraid there's been a significant oversight in our estate management," he began carefully. "According to your grandmother's will, you were supposed to assume control of the trust properties when you turned 25. That would have been 3 years ago. But my parents were supposed to be managing the properties until then, correct?" "No, sir. The will specifically names you as the sole beneficiary and trustee. Your parents were never involved in the estate management." My mother leaned forward in her chair. "Then who has been managing the properties for the past 8 years?" Mr. Henderson opened a thick file and began reviewing documents. "According to our records, Derek Milton has been serving as the interim property manager since your grandmother's death. He presented documentation claiming to be your authorized representative and has been collecting rental income and making management decisions for all 12 properties in the portfolio." The room started spinning. Derek had been managing my inheritance for 8 years, collecting rental income from 12 properties, and apparently keeping all the money for himself while simultaneously stealing from my personal accounts. "How much rental income are we talking about?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Mr. Henderson consulted his ledgers. "The properties generate approximately $18,000 per month in total rental income. Over 8 years, that amounts to roughly $1.7 million. My father made a sound like he had been punched in the stomach. My mother started crying quietly. "Mr. Henderson." I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Where has that money been going?" "According to the account records that Derek has provided, the funds have been used for property maintenance improvements and trust management expenses. However, I'm looking at these reports now with fresh eyes, and I have to say that some of these expenses seem excessive." He showed me a ledger entry for property improvement, Maple Street, in the amount of $67,000, dated just 6 months ago. "The Maple Street property is the house where Derek lives," I said. "Are you telling me he's been using trust funds to renovate his own residence?" "It appears that way, yes. There are similar entries for expensive improvements to the other properties where family members reside." I realized that Derek hadn't just been stealing my current income. He had been stealing my inheritance for nearly a decade. The trust fund that was supposed to secure my financial future had been systematically looted to fund my family's lifestyle, while they simultaneously manipulated me into supporting them with my personal earnings. "I need copies of every document," I said. "Every rental agreement, every expense report, every bank statement, and I need to know which family members have been living in trust properties." The answer was devastating. Sarah lived in a trust property apartment building paying reduced rent that was subsidized by trust funds. My parents had been living in a trust property house, believing they were renting from Derek, but actually living in a property that I owned. Derek had been using trust funds to purchase vehicles, finance business ventures, and fund the very lifestyle that he had been asking me to supplement with additional money. "Mr. Henderson, why wasn't I informed about any of this when I turned 25? The attorney looked deeply uncomfortable. "Derek assured us that he was coordinating with you directly and that you preferred to have him continue managing the properties while you focused on law school. He provided documentation that appeared to show your consent to the arrangement." "Forged documentation? That appears to be the case, yes." As we left the law office with boxes of trust documents, my father was unusually quiet. When we reached the parking lot, he stopped walking and turned to face me. "Milton, your mother and I need to tell you something," he said, his voice heavy with shame. "Derek came to us 6 months ago and said that you had discovered the trust fund and were angry that we hadn't told you about it earlier. He said you were threatening to evict us from our house and cut off all family financial support unless we helped convince you to let him continue managing the properties. And you believed him. He had bank statements showing the trust income, and he had documents that looked like legal agreements with your signature. He said you were under stress from law school and that you had asked him to handle the family financial arrangements to avoid conflict. My mother spoke for the first time since leaving the attorney's office. He also said that if we supported you in taking over the trust management, Sarah would lose her apartment and Derek would lose his business. He made it sound like you were trying to control the family by threatening everyone's housing and income. I understood now why my parents had seemed to believe Derek and Sarah's version of recent events. They had been manipulated for months with a complex story that painted me as the controlling family member, and Derek as the responsible mediator, trying to protect everyone from my supposedly erratic decisions. But there's something else, my father continued. When Derek showed us those documents, we noticed some discrepancies in the numbers. The trust income, he claimed, didn't match the property values we remembered from your grandmother's estate. We started asking questions, and that's when Derek suggested that we all take a family bonding trip to Paris to discuss the financial arrangements in a relaxed setting. The Paris trip was Derek's idea. He said you had suggested it as a way to celebrate your graduation, while giving the family time to work out the trust issues without pressure. He said you preferred to handle business matters privately, and that a family vacation would give everyone perspective on the importance of staying united. I realized that Derek had orchestrated the entire Paris deception as a way to get my parents out of the country, while he and Sarah intensified their theft. They had probably planned to drain additional accounts and disappear before my parents returned with uncomfortable questions about the trust fund. Dad, how long have Derek and Sarah known about the inheritance? Derek has known since the beginning. He was the one who volunteered to manage everything when your grandmother died. But Sarah only found out about 6 months ago, around the same time Derek started having those conversations with us about your supposed demands to take over. 6 months ago. That's when the frequency and amounts of their theft from my personal accounts had dramatically increased. They weren't just stealing my current income anymore. They were trying to extract as much money as possible before I discovered the larger inheritance fraud. As we drove home with boxes of evidence in the trunk, I realized that Derek and Sarah hadn't just betrayed me financially. They had systematically manipulated my entire family for years, creating a web of lies that turned my parents into unwitting accomplices and made me look like the unreasonable family member. But now I had evidence of everything. Bank records, forged documents, witness statements, and a clear timeline showing 8 years of systematic theft, totaling nearly $2 million. Milton, my mother said quietly from the passenger seat. What are you going to do? I looked at the trust documents on my lap, legal proof that I owned 12 properties worth over $2 million, and that my family had been systematically stealing from me for most of my adult life. I'm going to take back everything that belongs to me, I said. And then I'm going to show Derek and Sarah what justice looks like. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of a new beginning. I dressed in my best suit, the charcoal gray one I had worn to my law school graduation, and prepared for what would be the most important day of my legal career so far. My first stop was the county courthouse, where I filed papers to assume immediate legal control of all trust properties and terminate Derek's unauthorized management. The clerk, an efficient woman named Mrs. Patterson, reviewed the documentation with professional thoroughness. Mr. Milton, these papers appear to be in order, she said. However, I should warn you that assuming control of properties with current tenants requires proper legal notice. You can't simply evict people without following due process. I understand, I replied. But what about tenants who have been living in properties without paying rent, or who have been paying rent to someone who wasn't authorized to collect it? Those situations would likely require separate legal action. Do you have an attorney representing you in this matter? I smiled. I am an attorney, Mrs. Patterson, and I've prepared all the necessary documentation. The next stop was Derek's house, my house on Maple Street. I had called a locksmith and a process server to meet me there at 10 o'clock sharp. Derek's truck was in the driveway, along with Sarah's car, which told me they were both present for what was about to happen. The process server, a professional woman named Ms. Garcia, handed me the legal documents I had prepared over the weekend. "Are you ready for this, Mr. Milton?" "I've been ready for 8 years," I said. Derek answered the door wearing a bathrobe and holding a cup of coffee. His casual demeanor suggested he still believed he could talk his way out of the situation. "Milton, good morning. I'm glad you came by. We really need to sit down and work this whole misunderstanding out like family." Derek Milton. Ms. Garcia said formally, "You are hereby served with notice of eviction from this property notice of termination of unauthorized property management and a civil lawsuit seeking recovery of $1.8 million in stolen assets." Derek's coffee cup dropped from his hands, shattering on the front steps. "What, Milton, you can't be serious." The locksmith stepped forward with his equipment. "Sir, I need you to vacate the premises immediately so I can secure the property for the legal owner." "This is my house," Derek shouted. "I inherited it from my grandmother." I pulled out the property deed and held it up for him to see. "Actually, Derek, this house belongs to me. It always has. You've been living in my house for 8 years while charging me rent and stealing my inheritance money." Sarah appeared in the doorway behind Derek, her face pale with panic. "Milton, we can explain everything. Derek was protecting the family assets until you were ready to handle them responsibly. Protecting them." I laughed, the sound sharp and cold. "Sarah, Derek has stolen nearly $2 million from trust accounts. He's been collecting rental income from 12 properties and spending it on luxury renovations, expensive cars, and European vacations. The only thing he's been protecting is his access to my money." Ms. Garcia handed Sarah her own set of legal documents. "Sarah Milton, you are hereby served with notice of eviction from your apartment at 1247 Oak Avenue notice of fraudulent financial aid investigation and a civil lawsuit seeking recovery of stolen assets and identity theft damages. My apartment." "You can't evict me from my apartment. Your apartment is in a building that I own through the trust," I said. "You've been living there for 3 years, paying reduced rent that was subsidized with stolen trust funds, while simultaneously draining my personal bank accounts for additional living expenses." Derek tried to step toward me, but the locksmith and process server positioned themselves between us. "Milton, be reasonable," Derek said desperately. "We're family. We can work this out without involving lawyers and courts. Just tell me what you want, and we'll figure out a payment plan." "What I want is very simple, Derek. I want every penny you've stolen returned with interest. I want criminal charges filed for identity theft and fraud. I want you both to face the consequences of your actions without hiding behind family relationships." "But we'll be homeless," Sarah cried. "Where are we supposed to go? You should have considered that before you stole nearly $2 million from me." I replied without sympathy. The locksmith finished changing the locks and handed me the new keys. "The property is secured, Mr. Milton. Do you need us to remove any personal belongings? Give them 1 hour to collect essentials," I said. "Everything else can be sorted out through attorneys." As Derek and Sarah scrambled to gather their belongings, I made phone calls to begin the process of securing the other properties. The apartment building where Sarah lived, the commercial property Derek used for his fake consulting business, and the house where my parents currently resided. My phone buzzed with a call from my father. "Milton, Derek just called us in a panic. He's saying you've had him and Sarah evicted and that you're suing the family for millions of dollars." "That's accurate, Dad. I've assumed legal control of my inheritance, and I'm pursuing recovery of stolen assets." But son, where are they going to live? Derek said the locksmith changed all the locks, and they can't get back into their homes. Dad, they never owned those homes. They've been living in properties that belong to me using stolen money to pay for luxury improvements while charging me additional rent for the privilege of supporting them. There was a long pause. What about us? Milton Derek said we might be evicted too. You and Mom are welcome to stay in your house for as long as you want at a fair rental rate that reflects the actual market value. But the days of family members living in my properties for free while stealing my money are over. How much will the rent be? $1,200 per month, which is below market rate for a 3-bedroom house in that neighborhood. Derek has been collecting $1,800 per month in rental income from other tenants while letting you live there for free and charging me additional money for your housing expenses. I heard my father relay this information to my mother, followed by muffled conversation. Milton, we had no idea about any of this, my father said when he returned to the phone. We thought Derek owned the house, and we thought the money we occasionally received from the trust was just family generosity. I know you didn't, Dad. But Derek and Sarah have been systematically lying to all of us for years, and I can't allow it to continue. After I hung up, I spent the afternoon meeting with investigators from the district attorney's office who were building criminal cases for identity theft, fraud, and embezzlement. The evidence I had collected over the past week provided them with clear documentation of multiple felonies spanning several years. Detective Morrison, a seasoned investigator with 20 years of experience in financial crimes, reviewed my documentation with professional admiration. Mr. Milton, this is one of the most thoroughly documented fraud cases I've ever seen, she said. Your cousin and sister have committed multiple federal and state crimes, and you've provided us with evidence that would make any prosecutor happy. What kind of sentences are we looking at? For identity theft and fraud of this magnitude, Derek is looking at potentially 8 to 12 years in federal prison. Sarah's charges are less severe, but she's still facing 3 to 5 years, plus massive restitution obligations. That evening, Jessica came to my apartment with takeout dinner and found me sitting on my couch, surrounded by legal documents and property deeds. How was your first day as a property mogul? She asked with a gentle smile. Satisfying, I said, and I meant it. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm in control of my own financial destiny. Any regrets? I considered the question seriously. None. They had 8 years to be honest with me. They chose theft and manipulation instead. Every consequence they're facing now is the direct result of their own decisions. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Please call me. It's Derek. I'm using a friend's phone. We need to talk. I showed the message to Jessica, who shook her head firmly. Don't respond, she said. Let your attorney handle all communication from now on. I wasn't planning to, I replied, deleting the message without reading it again. But then my phone rang with a call from Derek's attorney, a man named Mr. Peterson, who had apparently been hired with borrowed money from extended family members. Mr. Milton, I represent Derek and Sarah Milton in this matter. I'd like to discuss the possibility of reaching a settlement that avoids lengthy litigation. Mr. Peterson, any settlement discussions can go through my attorney. However, I can tell you right now that I'm only interested in full restitution, plus interest criminal prosecution, for all applicable charges and permanent separation of my financial affairs from anyone who has defrauded me. Mr. Milton, surely you understand that sending family members to prison won't benefit anyone. These are good people who made some poor decisions under financial pressure. Mr. Peterson, these are thieves who systematically stole nearly $2 million from me over 8 years while manipulating my entire family with elaborate lies. They're going to face the full legal consequences of their choices. What if they were willing to make partial restitution and agree to counseling? Counseling. I laughed. Mr. Peterson, your clients don't need counseling. They need to be held accountable for systematic criminal fraud. The only settlement I'm interested in is full restitution and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Everything else will be decided by judges and juries. After I hung up, Jessica looked at me with something approaching awe. You've completely transformed, she said. A week ago, you were the family member who bent over backward to help everyone. Tonight, you're the person who won't tolerate being exploited. I learned something important this week, I said. Protecting yourself from abuse isn't cruel, it's necessary. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their destructive behavior. My phone buzzed one more time with a text from Sarah. I'm pregnant. You're going to send your niece or nephew's mother to prison. I stared at the message for a long moment, recognizing it as a final manipulation attempt. Then I forwarded it to my attorney with a note. Evidence of continued manipulation. Please include in the case file. Justice was coming, and this time, nothing was going to stop it. 6 months later, I stood in the same banquet hall where this entire journey had begun, but everything was different. The room was filled with genuine laughter and conversation people who had come to celebrate, not because they felt obligated, but because they wanted to share this moment with me. The occasion was my admission to the bar and the launch of my own law practice specializing in financial fraud and family law. Jessica wore the same navy blue dress from that first disastrous dinner, but her smile was radiant as she moved through the crowd introducing herself to colleagues and friends who had become part of our lives. My parents sat at a table near the front, looking healthier and happier than I had seen them in years. The financial counseling sessions had been difficult but transformative. They had learned to distinguish between supporting family and enabling criminal behavior, and our relationship had grown stronger through honesty than it had ever been through manipulation. Milton, this is incredible, my mother said as I stopped by their table. I'm so proud of who you've become. Thanks, Mom. How are you adjusting to the new living situation? After Derek's eviction, my parents had decided to downsize to a smaller apartment that they could afford on their retirement income. They paid me market-rate rent for one of the trust properties, and for the first time in their marriage, they had complete financial independence and dignity. It's wonderful, my father said firmly. We're actually saving money for the first time in decades because we're not constantly being asked to bail out Derek and Sarah's emergencies. The transformation in my extended family relationships had been equally dramatic. Aunt Patricia, Uncle James, and the other relatives who had initially believed Derek and Sarah's manipulation had eventually seen the evidence and understood what had really happened. Several of them had approached me with their own stories of financial abuse by Derek and Sarah that they had never reported. I should have known something was wrong when Derek started driving that expensive truck, Aunt Patricia had told me. But he always had a story about business success or family loans that made it sound legitimate. The criminal cases had resolved exactly as Detective Morrison had predicted. Derek received a 10-year sentence for identity theft, fraud, and embezzlement. Sarah received 4 years plus massive restitution obligations. Both sentences included provisions requiring them to undergo financial counseling and maintain steady employment upon release. But the most satisfying outcome wasn't the prison sentences, it was the complete recovery of stolen assets. My forensic accountant had traced every fraudulent transaction, every forged document, and every hidden bank account. The restitution orders required Derek and Sarah to repay not just the stolen money, but also interest, legal fees, and punitive damages. Milton Jessica appeared at my side with a champagne flute. Your client, Mrs. Henderson, wants to thank you personally for recovering her retirement savings from that investment scam. Mrs. Henderson, a 72-year-old widow who had been defrauded by a fake financial advisor, made her way over with tears in her eyes. Mr. Milton, because of your work, I got back every penny that man stole from me. she said, grasping my hands. "I can afford to keep my house and maintain my independence. You gave me back my dignity." This was why I had chosen to specialize in financial fraud cases. Every client reminded me of my own experience with betrayal and theft, and every successful recovery felt like a personal victory against the people who exploit trust for financial gain. The trust properties had become the foundation of my law practice and my community involvement. I had converted several buildings into affordable housing for families escaping financial abuse, and the rental income funded a legal aid clinic that provided free services to fraud victims who couldn't afford attorney fees. "How does it feel to be completely financially independent?" Jessica asked as we stepped onto the venue's balcony for a quiet moment. "Powerful," I said, echoing my response from that first morning when I had started fighting back. "But more than that, peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not worried about someone stealing my money or manipulating my generosity." "And your family relationships?" I considered the question carefully. "Better than they've ever been because they're built on honesty now instead of financial dependence. The people who are in my life now are here because they want to be, not because they need something from me." Sarah had been released early for good behavior and had actually written me a letter of apology. Not the manipulative pseudo-apology I had expected, but a genuine acknowledgement of the pain she had caused and the lies she had told. She was working as a bookkeeper and slowly repaying her restitution debt, and had asked if we could eventually have a conversation about rebuilding our relationship on honest terms. Derek, on the other hand, continued to maintain that he had been managing family assets responsibly, and that I had overreacted to normal family financial arrangements. He would serve his full sentence and emerge from prison with nothing except a criminal record and a massive debt that would follow him for the rest of his life. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them completely?" Jessica asked. "I've already forgiven them," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean trusting them with my money again, or pretending that theft is acceptable because we're related. Forgiveness means releasing the anger so it doesn't poison my own life." As the evening wound down, I found myself reflecting on the life lessons that had emerged from this devastating experience. The most important realization was that enabling someone's irresponsible behavior doesn't help them. It hurts them by preventing them from learning natural consequences and developing genuine responsibility. For years, I had believed that supporting my family financially was an expression of love and success. In reality, my constant bailouts had prevented Derek and Sarah from developing honest work ethics and had enabled them to build their lives on lies and manipulation. The second lesson was about boundaries and self-protection. I had spent my adult life believing that saying no to family was selfish and cruel. Now I understood that protecting yourself from abuse is not only acceptable, it's necessary for healthy relationships to develop. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, taking the microphone for a final toast. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate not just my professional achievements, but the beginning of a new chapter built on honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. I raised my glass toward my parents, who smiled back with genuine pride. I learned this year that true family relationships must be built on respect and trust, not financial dependence and manipulation. Sometimes protecting yourself from abuse is the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved because it creates space for authentic connections to grow. The crowd raised their glasses in response, and I felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with money or revenge. It was the satisfaction of knowing that I had broken generational patterns of financial abuse and created space for healthy relationships to flourish. As Jessica and I walked to our car after the celebration, she asked the question that I had been pondering for months. What would you say to someone who's going through something similar right now? Someone whose family is taking advantage of their generosity, I thought about all the clients I had represented, all the people who had suffered financial abuse from people they trusted, and all the lessons I had learned through my own painful experience. I would tell them that their financial security and emotional well-being matter, I said. I would tell them that being generous doesn't mean being a victim, and that protecting yourself from abuse isn't selfish, it's necessary. Most importantly, I would tell them that people who truly love you will respect your boundaries, not try to manipulate you into ignoring them. 6 months ago, I had stood alone in an empty banquet hall, devastated by betrayal and theft. Tonight, I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me building a career that helped others recover from financial abuse and living a life built on honesty and self-respect. The transformation had been painful, but necessary. Sometimes, justice requires you to stop protecting the people who are hurting you and start protecting yourself instead. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself from abuse? How do you balance generosity with healthy boundaries in your relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experiences might help someone else who's struggling with similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more content about overcoming family financial abuse and building healthy boundaries. And share this story with anyone who might need to hear that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for everyone's growth and healing. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to justice, to peace. Remember, you deserve relationships built on respect, not exploitation. Never let anyone convince you otherwise.